Hello, medical terminology students. Oh, look at that. We are almost halfway through the semester. All right, this week we are doing two chapters, and it's chapter 11, which is on the blood, and chapter 18, um, I believe, which is mental health. So let's get in with the blood and medical terminology related to the blood. Okay, so different elements of blood, and you're going to hear these terms quite a bit. RBC stands for red blood cells. Um, come on. And hematocrit has to do with a blood test that we use to uh, determine the percentage of like hemat in your blood in comparison to the rest of the components of your red blood cells. And then hemoglobin, a protein found in the red blood cells that helps with energy. WBC is referred to white blood cells. Look at the two medical terms for red blood cells and white blood cells. We have erythrocytes and leukocytes. Um, so the last word part is sites, which is a suffix. Um, but if you look, then the very beginning, one is erythro and one is leuco. Erythro means red and leuco means white. Um, and then platelets. This is another type of site, thrombocyte, and throm actually it's kind of like a not a blood clot, but similar to that because it's a component. So um, let's move on. This is a picture in your book on page 362 that you could take a look at. It just shows you the breakdown of what is actually in your blood because it's not just, red blood cells. There's other components that you need in order to survive. All right. We've got some root elements and we are, let's see, trying to think what page we're on for these root elements. Starting on page 363. So let's look at coal. What does coal mean? Glue. Site in this area means cell. Crit, to separate. So like the hematocrit, we're actually separating things out to take a look at it. And then gen, to produce. All right, functions of the blood. You will see the functions of blood on page, hold on, back up here, 363. These are the overall functions of the blood. There are different functions for each component that's in the blood, and that's later on in the chapter. So you guys can read these, the functions of the blood. Now we're looking at some word definitions. So gave you the definition. The idea of this is for you to figure out what the actual medical term is related to this definition. So a breakdown product of skeletal muscle, creatinine. A substance with a pH above 7 is alkaline. And then the opposite, the substance with pH below the line is an acid. And an end product of nitrogen metabolism is urea. And this actually is a waste. And if it's found in higher percentages in your blood, then you can be at toxic levels and cause some issues. And then sticky, resistant to flow, viscous. Blood is a little bit viscous. It should be. We don't want it to be completely thin. So the first component of red blood cells, you can see this is kind of what it looks like. It looks like kind of like a little saucer, got the rings around the edge of it. And they're red. The more red they are, the more hemoglobin that you have within the blood cells. So the function individually of the red blood cells, again, you can read this on your own. That's on page 365. This is the life cycle of the red blood cells on the same page, 365. You'll see it. Red blood cells, You don't keep all the ones you have. They're constantly dying off, and your body is recreating them because after they lose their life expectancy, we need new ones in our body to be replaced. These are some medical terms that actually have to do with the creation of red blood cells. Um, so take a look at these. You can see that each medical term starts with the word erythro. And if you remember back at the slide before, erythro means red. So all of these have to do with the red blood cells. Now we move on to white blood cells. And white blood cells, totally different functions. And those functions, you'll see them on page 367 because they talk about the different types of white blood cells. And there are multiple types. And these here just show you what they are in the categories. So we have neutrophils, and then eosinophils, basophils, another term called polymorphonuclear. You guys can look that one up. And then we have agranulocytes, monocytes, lymphocytes, and then our B and our T cells, which those have to do with fighting off infection. So here's our polymorphonuclear. All right, difference, oops, there we go. Sorry, guys. What's the difference between these terms? So we've got agranulocyte, granulocyte, leukocyte versus lymphocyte versus monocyte. You'll be able to look that up in your textbook, but obviously they all have the suffix "cyte" at the end of them, or some people can say it's a root word, sure. But it means cell, no matter whether it's identified as a suffix or if it's identified as a second root word in the term. So now we are into the antigens, blood group. We have red cell antigens. So let's just take a look at the breakdown. We have antigens, we have antibodies, agglutination, and then we have our ABO and RH blood groups. You guys can read up on that. I don't really need you to know anything that has to do with the actual, like what blood type you are. But here is a little picture that just kind of shows you the differences of like your antigens. RH blood group has to do with pregnancy. If you've ever been pregnant before or had someone who is pregnant and they have they talk about the positive or negative RH factor. This is what it has to do with, but you guys don't need to know anything for me. Homeostasis, the control of bleeding. You might see that one on a test going forward. So, oh, sorry, not homeostasis, hemostasis. Homeostasis is hemo means blood. Stasis means stopping, controlling. And then we have our platelets, coagulation factors. This is the things that are going on in the body to stop us from bleeding. And then vasoconstrictors. Most of the time, these all work hand in hand. So like if you cut yourself and you're bleeding, eventually the bleeding stops, or it's supposed to stop, as long as all of these factors are in place to actually help stop that bleeding. Sorry about that. And then here we go. Identify the correct term for the given definitions. A substance that prevents clots, a clot attached to a diseased blood vessel or heart lining, the process of blood clotting. So you guys can take a look at those, see if you can find them. So now we're into conditions. Anemia. There's different types of anemia. And so obviously anemia is either a lack of red blood cells, a lack of hemoglobin in the red blood cells. It could also mean that the blood cells themselves are not forming properly. So they are in a different shape than that little saucer shape, and therefore they can't do their function. And one of the you can see one of the examples is sickle cell anemia, where it's the shape is not that round, plump, saucer-like shape. It looks more like a crescent moon. And once the type of anemia is identified, then the doctor can actually prescribe the treatment appropriate for the anemia and correct the root cause. Some other disorders of the red blood cells, these are some long terms. And if you break them down, you'll be able to figure out what the meaning is. And obviously I have it right here for you. White blood cell disorders, just trying to get to, um, so a lymphoid, have that down here, lymphoid, acute lymphoblastic, leukopenia, and pancytopenia. Leukocytosis, lymphocytosis, leukemia, and our final one is myeloid. And then now we go into the disorders of the coagulation. That means, to stop the blood, to stop you from bleeding, to stop it. And there's conditions where you would just continue to bleed, or so that'd be like hemophilia, or if you have a thrombus or an embolus that actually is preventing you from actually passing the blood through your system, which is what you want it to do. The term purpura, hematoma, and then petechiae. And the petechiae is really like when someone, gets choked or strangled, they get those little teeny blood vessels that burst in their cheeks, and you can get them in your eyes, or if you've strained something, either by lifting something or straining to have a bowel movement, sometimes those little teeny blood vessels will burst and you get the little dots on your eyes or on your cheeks. All right, we got through that pretty fast. Procedures and pharmacology. Here's some different diagnostic procedures. CBC is referred to as a complete blood count, which actually determines how many red blood cells, how many white blood cells, platelets in your system. And they can even do a further test of determining the percentage of the different types of white blood cells in your blood. These last two, prothrombin time and partial thromboplastin time, those have to do with your bleeding. Therapeutic procedures that you're going to see: transfusion, bone marrow transplant, hematopoietic stem cells. So this hematopoietic stem cells, actually, they would put that into you, infuse that into you, and it actually initiates the body to create more red blood cells. Pharmacology of blood clotting, all of these are anticoagulants, which actually stop the clots or break them up. But then it also means that you have more of a chance to bleed out if you are bleeding, because these here thin your blood or, again, remove the clots. Here's some terms that you might see in your chapter, and I believe we're actually at the very end of this chapter. So we have megakaryocyte, semilunar. That one, there's the shape, and it has to do with the sickle cell anemia. So it's semilunar, where it's a lunar moon, looks like a crescent moon. Streptokinase, osmosis, macrophage, angioplasty, and spherocytosis. That is it for chapter 11. And again, for this week, we're doing these two chapters, chapter 11 and chapter 18.